Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The fact that you, Mr. President, will be in office for another month will mean that you will be honored even more, that people will say even more nice things about you. But Leo Tindemans, our common friend, taught me that you can't compliment young people too much. So I'm not doing that tonight. I knew you when we were both young and handsome. Now we are only handsome. My first contact dates back to the time when the EPP group took the British Conservatives on board. Helmut Kohl strongly urged us to admit John Major. And in the small group that decided on that, you already stood out 30 years ago because of your balanced judgment and your sense of humor. For the rest, these qualities keep someone to his days. At a time when your career seemed to be over, you were called to the office that you have filled with verve over the past 5 years. I've experienced that too. We are increvable, indestructible, even if we are not eternal, which is a pity. The most important thing in life is not legacy, but it is the answer to the question of whether you yourself are satisfied with the course, or whether you can have a good conscience. And you can't have it. You can have it. Greece remained in the Eurozone. It even has negative short-term interest rates today. Imagine, negative interest rates. The Greeks are grateful to you for that solidarity. The European pillar of social rights is rightly one of the successes that are close to your heart and close to your conviction. And in the refugee crisis, you were one of the few people who kept saying that the refugee was a human being. Of course, we had to protect our external borders. But words, the way we talk about others, words shape our society as well. Words can divide, words can connect. In the Brexit negotiations, you spoke on behalf of the 27, and with Trump, you spoke on behalf of 28 member states. We spoke with one voice at a time, yours. Just as we delivered one message at the climate conference in Paris 4 years ago. We are a geopolitical actor when we are united, and only then. We have created 11 million jobs for the Eurozone over the past 5 years. And the Juncker Strategic Investment Plan contributed heavily, together with the ECB of Mario Draghi, who is now under attack for creating jobs. Comprenne qui pourra. Understand who can. We know all the challenges we face. The EU 27 is in better shape today than it was 5 years ago. The European caravan continues, even though the UK continues on its own, alone, very alone. I once, dear Jean-Claude, gave my father history books as a gift for his birthday, until I found out he didn't read it. He was only interested in the future. I became that way too. And that's why I didn't write memoirs, but I don't want to discourage you either. But keep looking ahead with us. Stay a committed spectator, un spectateur engagé. You are not a man of opinions, but of convictions. And the European conviction is your deepest conviction. Because it's about sharing. It's about common destiny, about solidarity. Because there are values behind the institutions, our values, about how we see life and living together. I'm happy to give you the floor. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I still have my sciatica, which explains the way I'm walking. Not running, walking. Beste Herman, we have known each other for many years, if not centuries. I think that one of the best encounters I had in my life were the one with you. We were ministers of budget together, we were chairs of our political parties, we were prime ministers together, and when you were president of the European Council, myself having been appointed president of the Commission, our cooperation was instantly perfect. No surprise for the two of us, but it's a big surprise for others. I started my mandate with you, traveling to Brisbane, Australia with you for the G20. You may remember it was there, under the sun of Australia, that David Cameron informed us of his intention to hold a referendum on the UK's membership of the EU. That is when I knew, no matter how good a campaigner he was, he would lose it. And I told him so. And he didn't believe it, but it happened. I will always remember this moment. Everything that Europe is today began as an idea, born during the Second World War and born after the Second World War. We know that it is by debating that we test our thoughts and dare our dreams. For over 20 years, the European Policy Centre has been at the center of the debate on Europe. And your ideas, your thoughts, sometimes your dreams, have helped shape the future of the European Union. I'm happy to be invited here to speak about my thoughts and experiences. And I'm happy that I will deliver my last Brussels speech here, hopefully. Herman, even though, admittedly, initially, I would have preferred your job as President of the European Council. Today I know better, but I will never forget the day when I entered your office telling you that I had the intention to become a lead candidate of the EPP. You told me, okay, as a European, I like the idea, but as your good friend, you have to know that this is a tough job, a full-time job. I should have listened to you. It's more than a full-time job. It is important to remember where we came from in 2014. Europe had been weakened by the most severe social and economic crisis since the Second World War. Europeans' trust in the European Union was at an all-time low. Turnout in European elections had done nothing but fall for decades and stagnated in 2014. This is why I spoke of a commission of the last chance. It was not the best formula I have invented in my life, by the way, before being elected by the European Parliament. But I believe we will seize this chance by getting the economy back on track and making this a more social union that works for all. I believe we are looking at a different European Union today, as you rightly said just a few minutes ago. Our economy is stronger and more resilient. Europeans are, to some extent, reconnecting with Europe, and we are slowly finding our place in the world. When I say that our economy is stronger, it's not just because it has grown for 7 consecutive years, 25 quarters, because more than 14 million jobs have been created in Europe during the mandate of this Commission, or because the level of employment is at its highest level ever, but because I know that these figures fall not from sky, They come in part from our efforts to make smart use of our resources, which we have done via the European Fund for Strategic Investments, initially known as Juncker Plan. Juncker Plan was the invention of those who thought that it would be a total failure. As it is a success now, it's called European Fund for Strategic Investments, but it's exactly the same. We have mobilized over 440 billion euros in investments across the European Union, increased the European GDP by 0.9% and adding 1.1 million jobs. And we can be proud that more than 1 million small-sized companies are receiving financing that wasn't available to them before. These results come from the flexibility introduced in the Stability and Growth Pact, which has supported reforms and helped public finances recover. Controversial at the time, but the result speaks for themselves. More than half of the Euro governments were against these flexibility lines we have, by which we have enriched the Stability Pact. They never approved it, but they followed the wisdom of the proposals of the Commission for once. These good results come from the general atmosphere we have changed, or we tried to change, and we succeeded to change in Europe. But if I'm saying that our economy is stronger, it's not just about the numbers. I was a labor minister for 17 years, the most happy period of my life. Although labor ministers are not very popular, but at least you have the impression to do something for those you are responsible for. And I always believed that economic strength is nothing without social protection for people. With the support of the European Parliament and Council, today we have the first ever pillar of social right, proclaimed at the first European Social Summit in 20 years. I was president of the European Council back in 1997, and I was asked by France, should I say by Jospin, to organize an employment summit. The conclusions of the European Council at that period were that we should have a job summit year after year. So it took 20 years to have the second one. But for my whole life, I never believed in second-class workers. Today, this is enshrined in European law with a simple principle: the same wage for the same work in the same place. I could go on, but my point is that I can say our economy is strong because our social values, they too are strong. While strengthening our economy, we have also strengthened our resilience. This I can tell you because we have been tried and tested again and again. From Greece to migration to Brexit, the three most significant crises I had to face, it has not been an easy ride, but each time we have shown solidarity when it counted the most, unity when disunity threatened to prevail, and true European resilience. When people ask me, and this happens very often these weeks, what the Commission's biggest achievement was, it is always Greece. It deserves a book in itself. So I have to write a book, at least 2 books. There are many who take credit for this, and someone without merit. I would like to take a little of the merit, at least, because when I was, as a president of the Commission, dealing with the Greek crisis, numerous were the prime ministers and finance ministers calling me and saying, Jean-Claude, this is not your job. This is the job of the member states. But reading the treaty, I'm amongst those who know the treaty. And in the treaty, there is one invitation to the Commission saying that the Commission is in charge of the general interests of the European Union. Accepting that one country would be ejected from the euro area would not have been in the general interest of the European Union, so I did what I was able to do to keep Greece as a member of the euro area, and our efforts, they were numerous, in fact triggered an estimated 2% GDP increase in that country, whereas in the years before they were losing 5%, all in all 25%. And I insisted, because this was not done before, that the program went through a social impact assessment and contained a strong social dimension. I have to say here that this was not the idea of the IMF. It was our idea. And by the way, I never understood why the IMF was so deeply involved in the solution of the Greek problem we had to face. If California has a problem, they are not going to the IMF, they are going to Washington, although the IMF is also located in Washington. And Europe should have been able to deal with the Greek crisis with its own instruments and its own means, but all the instruments were not there. During Herman's time, many instruments were added to the instrumentarium we had, and that was a very weak one. After what he did, it has become by far stronger than it was before. This August, we marked the one-year anniversary of Greece successfully concluding the program, and the efforts taken are delivering results. Unemployment in Greece is down. More than 230,000 new jobs have been created since the start of the Stability Support Program in 2015. Economic growth has rebounded to 2% as an average and is set to remain at that very level. Public finances have returned to a sustainable path, but the country, of course, must continue to focus on fully addressing the social and economic consequences of the crisis, but we are a far cry from 2015. Who would have thought it in 2014, that Greece would be in such a better situation today than it was before? But the most divisive of the crises is by far migration. I remember standing in the European Parliament plenary in April 2015, making a cry for saving lives at sea and opening up legal paths for migration. I got, which is not so normal in the European Parliament, a standing ovation. I'm getting now standing ovations everywhere, but at that time it was less obvious. And I remember saying to the parliamentarians, you applaud me now, but will you still applaud me in 6 months from now? The answer, as we know, was no. We have to be honest. We did not achieve all we wanted to on migration, but the advances we did make remain nevertheless important. My approach to migration has always been European to the core. This has never been and will never be a challenge that any single member state can handle alone. For me, making a success of the Union's migration policy has been about reinforcing this and with policies to address all angles, from border management to helping those who really need Europe's protection and a safe place for their families, to working with our international partners on the ground and addressing the root causes that push people to leave their homes in the first place. More was achieved in this very context than often acknowledged. In the last years, we have offered a safe haven to more than Australia, Canada, and the US combined, 3 times more. Europe did not become a fortress during these years. We were the place accepting those who have the problems they have. An estimated 1.6 million refugees currently benefit from our support to Turkey. 8 million EU-funded primary healthcare consultations have been delivered, and some 600,000 Syrian refugee children now have access to accession thanks to the European support. Our borders are more secure, but they are not secure enough. With the new border and coast guard we have put into place. And I was proposing months ago to increase the number of the coast guards to 10,000 officers in 2020. Everyone is inviting the Commission, the European Union, to increase the protection of the external borders. The Commission has proposed 10,000 guards. The Council was postponing this to the year 2027. It's easy to ask the Commission to do something. It's less easy to follow the Commission when the Commission is making sound proposals. And our Emergency Trust Fund for Africa has proven to be an effective tool to address some of the root causes of irregular migration. But I'm warning against this attitude. You can visit and revisit in Europe. Our relations with Africa are not migration dominated. Our relations with Africa have to be transformed because we have to move from a policy of charity to a policy of equal partnership. If you are talking to the Africans, don't mention migration every minute. This is against the dignity of the African people, and I tried to avoid this era. But the first crisis we faced during this mandate was Brexit. As you are reading about in the press every day, I will be short. I have spent too much time with Brexit. It's enough now. It could have brought the house down, acted as a catalyst for others, and split Europe forever. But it did not. Unity has prevailed, and one should not underestimate how many conversations and encouragements this took me and others, and Michel Barnier mainly, to make this thing happen, unity of the 27. But I have to admit that it has paid me to spend so much of this mandate having to deconstruct when all I have ever wanted to do is move the European Union forward, not back. But to the surprise of many, we have not fallen apart, quite the reverse. In short, when put to the test, as we have been over the last 5 years, the resilience and strength of the Union has shown through, and in the face of the greatest challenges we have ever met in recent decades. I'm not a fan of polls, because I don't believe them. The opinion polls in Luxembourg were always, when it came to my popularity, 95%, so they must have been wrong. But the latest data show that today trust in the European Union is at its highest level in 10 years. In the last year alone, we have seen the number of people who have a positive image of the European Union increase in not less than 20 member states, even according to some opinion polls in the United Kingdom. They came too late. But nevertheless, the European Union has never been as popular as it is for the time being in the UK. People say they feel more European. There is more support for the Economic and Monetary Union and the single currency than ever before. And a majority of Europeans now believe their voice, their individual voice, counts in the European Union. Beyond this polling data, which you can choose to trust or not, I'm rather pessimistic when it comes to a scientific analysis of opinion polls. There is the stark fact that European elections this year, we saw the highest turnout in 20 years and a sharp decline in the number of parties advocating to take their countries out of the euro area or out of the European Union. I believe there is a lot we have done to deliver for Europeans, but I don't want to swim in this pleasant channel of auto-satisfaction. But I think we have done a lot to deliver for Europeans. For example, we have put a great deal of effort into delivering more to young Europeans, helping them to travel, to study, to find work when unemployed, and give back to society through the new European Solidarity Corps. Between the start of this Commission and 2020, 4 million people are expected to benefit from the Erasmus program, which is one of the biggest successes ever of the European Union. Around 50,000 young Europeans have already taken part in our new Discover EU program, many of whom have been able to travel to another European city for the first time. And since we announced, which is largely underestimated, a new European Solidarity Corps, over 172,000 young people have registered their interest to take part, and more than 30,000 are already active, volunteering, training, running their own solidarity projects all over Europe. That's Europe at its best. We are listening more to what people want. When I took this job, I said to every single member of the college, I do not want you to stay in Brussels all the time. Some of them are exaggerating because they are never in Brussels, but it's not good for the commissioners to be imprisoned in the Parlement. I said to them, travel, explain, have dialogues with citizens and with parliaments. We have embarked on the first constant dialogue with European citizens. 1,800 citizen dialogues have taken place in more than 650 cities. Members of the Commission were visiting more than 800 national and regional parliaments after the publication of the so-called white paper in March 2017. Their ideas, those of our citizens, their engagement, their expectations have guided us through the mandate. For instance, we adopted the first ever EU-wide strategy on plastics, and we set up a dedicated European border and coast guard, both themes that citizens have mentioned in almost every single citizen dialogue. I also knew that if Europeans were to see the worth of Europe once more, we needed to think where we could add the most value for our citizens. So we cut the amount of legislation from around 100 major initiatives in 2014 to 23 in 2015 and just 15 in 2018. This amounts to 83% fewer legislative initiatives over the last 5 years compared to before, and thus has allowed us to stay focused on the 10 clear priorities I have mentioned at the beginning of my mandate. And lastly, although I'm not the last to do so, I campaigned for my job as President of the Commission. I presented my ideas to European citizens in 33 cities in 18 countries in 45 days, because I was appointed by the EPP when the campaign was over. And so I had to speed up the whole process. What I'm sad about is that the European Commission, like other European institutions, are heavily criticized for being non-democratic, over-bureaucratic. We are dealt with by some, not only in Britain, as a group of putschists. I have to say here, I have been elected 11 times in my life. Sometimes at national level and 4 times at European level. So I do not feel like a putschist. I'm an elected guy. And I'm not accepting that the Commission is always described as an anonymous corps of bureaucrats, technocrats, blind and stubborn people. We are not. I took 4 former prime ministers in my Commission, 11 former ministers, all the others having been elected to the European Parliament or to the National Parliament. Apart from the British Commissioner, everyone in my Commission has been elected. And the British Commissioners, they were excellent, Lord Hill and Julian King. Now, when Julian King appeared for the first time at the college, I said, progress cannot be stopped in Britain. We had a lord, now we have a king. And he behaved like a grand seigneur because he was doing whatever he was asked to do and whatever he was able to do. I see a different union today. I think that our citizens, too, see a different union today. But I also know that we are seen by others as a different union today. I can tell you that this was the most clear for me during this mandate when I was standing in the Oval Office last July 18, looking at Europe from the outside. I would be happy to credit my excellent negotiating skills alone for why I was able to avoid a trade war and regional understanding with President Trump. But the reality is that I was speaking from a position of strength because I was speaking with the force of 28 member states behind me and with an exclusive EU competence, that of the Commission, in trade matters. During these negotiations with Donald Trump, from time to time he had to interrupt the session. And then he called me back at the Oval Office. And then he said, listen, Jean-Claude, I do not want a deal with the European Union. I would like to have a deal with you personally. And then I said, no, I'm Europe. L'État, c'est moi. And for a Luxembourger sitting in the Oval Office telling the President of the United States that I have to be taken serious, c'est du jamais vu. Today, the EU is clearly the world trade superpower. We have agreements with nearly 70 countries around the world, covering 40% of the global GDP. But more important is that in the last 2 years, we have ushered a new generation of trade agreements with some of the world's biggest economies. Canada, we were negotiating with for 20 years. Japan, we were negotiating with for decades. And these agreements, although heavily criticized in our public opinions, they reflect our values, from the transparent way in which they were negotiated, to the inbuilt protection of environmental and labor standards. This is trade done Europe's way. And in many other areas, Europe has become a major player on the international stage and a positive force for change. Our partners know that they can count on us to defend the multilateral rule-based global order. And around the world, the European Union is seen as a beacon of hope, a guardian of peace, and a source of stability. That's the reason why I'm unhappy about the result of the recent European Council when it comes to North Macedonia and Albania. We have promised both that we would deliver, we did not. And if the European Union wants to be respected worldwide, we have to keep our promises, internal promises and promises to other parts of the world. We are respected because the European Union is providing over half of the world's development and humanitarian aid. It is the European Union which is building new partnerships based on instruments, on stronger commercial and economic ties with our strategic partners, such as our twin continent, Africa, I have tried to change our relations to Africa, proposing a new alliance with Africa, because I do think that Africa matters in the future. They will be more numerous, they will be, rightly so, more demanding, and we have to be prepared to deal with them in the best way possible. And when it comes to our defense, we are finally acting together. I remain convinced that we have to reinforce European security and defense, which is why, starting in 2014, I called for a permanent structured cooperation in defense matters. The sleeping beauty of the Lisbon Treaty has now been woken from her slumber. It is why we created the European Defence Fund. It is why Donald Tusk and I work to create a real culture of cooperation between the European Union and NATO. And there are good reasons for working together in a better way when it comes to defense. In Europe, we have 173 kind of weapons. In US, 30. In Europe, we have 18 types of tanks. In US, 1. We are spending half of the American budget when it comes to defense, but so we should be efficient at 50%. We are efficient at 15%. So we have to reconsider this whole matter in a way that we have to work together in a better way. If we were working together in a better way, we could make the economy of 50 to 100 billion euros per year. Let's do it, instead of giving lessons to others. We have to become more efficient internationally. I have called this Weltpolitikfähigkeit in German. If we are sticking to the rule of unanimity in all the matters related to foreign affairs, we are lost. I'm strongly defending the view that also in the foreign policy, we have, in some areas at least, to decide by qualified majority. It's impossible to explain to the rest of the world that we cannot give our judgment assessment in the Human Rights Committee in Geneva because one member state is considering that in China everything is perfect. So we have to make up our minds when it comes to the decision-making process in foreign affairs. So, Herman, I'm thanking you to be here today and to listen to me today. These were 5 years to get Europe back on track, from the economy to our place in the world and via every crisis along the way. We had to prove our worth to people, or we would have lost our citizens forever. I would not like to say that we are out of the woods, because I don't like auto-satisfaction, although I'm tempted to be in the middle of auto-satisfaction these days. Brexit is a shame, and is the most difficult problem we had ever to face. I don't think that Brexit is in the interest of Britain or in the interest of the European Union. All of us will pay the price. I did, as far as Brexit is concerned, and as far as the other problems I was mentioning, and I could not mention all the problems we had to face, I did my best. It has been the honor of my life to serve the European Union. Obrigado, thank you, dankeschön, merci, bedankt.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your speech. I have now the task. Thanks to all of you too. We have agreed with the President that there will be an opportunity to pose some questions to him. So my role now is to orchestrate a short Q&A sessions. And so I'm looking around already for those who want to raise their voice. Let's take, yes, and in your seat there is a microphone which you will find. Yes, sir. There is a seat, in your seat there's a microphone. If you open it.
It doesn't help because you are pointing at everyone.
No, look, he's already looking for it. And he found it. Should be on.
New technologies.
We will get there. Yes, now it works. Thank you.
Hooray. My name is George Forris. I used to be a journalist here in Brussels. Now I'm a university teacher. The Hungarian government, some Hungarian government officials tend to say that one of the failures of the present Commission to let the UK go. I don't share this view, but it reflects something else, that I think that the present Commission lost somehow some of the Central and Eastern European countries. I remember those days when the small or less influential countries instinctively relied on the Commission and the EU institutions. And now many countries among them tend to turn against, criticize, and follow other paths. How is it happened? Why is it happened? Is it irreparable? And what is your share, if there is any, with it?
There are no small countries in the European Union. I'm a specialist of smaller entities. But I was always saying to the British Prime Minister, there are two great countries in Europe, the Grand Duchy and Great Britain. And I don't accept these differences between big and small, because this is leading nowhere. As far as Hungary and other Central European countries are concerned, I'm deeply disappointed by the propaganda they are circulating around, because I was always trying to accommodate them. I give you one example. The Commission had proposed a compulsory relocation of refugees through all the 28 countries. The day before, the Council of Interior and Justice Ministers were meeting. I was calling all the heads of state and government of the reluctant countries, telling them we are not insisting on the compulsory dimension of our proposal. If you can accept the figures without accepting the compulsory diktat, as they were saying, I could easily agree, and they agreed. The day after, they did disagree. I was proposing to the Polish and to others, could you please take in your countries the unaccompanied refugee children? They agreed, but they never did it. All of these countries had particular problems. I was able to solve them without making press conferences, as they did not do the same. Nuclear power stations in Hungary and other things. So I have the feeling that this unfortunate misunderstanding is mainly due to domestic political reasons. I had to suffer a huge anti-Juncker campaign in Hungary, but I did never react to that because I did not want to feed this sentiment. I have the feeling that I did the right things with the Eastern and Central European countries because they are belonging to our family. Europe would not be complete without the Visegrad 4 and other countries in the region. And I do think that these things can be repaired. I'm working with Ursula von der Leyen on the ways, and means and instruments how to repair this misunderstanding.
Thank you. There was a lady in the third row. Yes, please indicate your name and.
Yes, my name. Thank you. I found the microphone. My name is Lise Voer. I come from ETNO, the European Telco Association here in Brussels. But I ask on my own behalf now. You said Brexit is one of the worst things that happened in your period. What have we learned from the Brexit crisis? Is there anything we need to change in the Commission going forward?
Don't always give the impression that the Commission is responsible for the result of the referendum. It is not. If during 46 years you are told day after day, and if day after day you are reading in your papers that the place of the British is not really in Europe, but that they are there for economic and internal market reasons, and all the rest is nonsense, bullshit, as they are saying in the European Parliament, don't be surprised then if voters are invited to give their impression, their assessment, that some of them, small majority, but nevertheless a clear majority, is voting like a majority of the British sovereign people is voting. We have made some mistakes. I was always convinced that this referendum would be a negative one for Europe and for Britain. I had, as I told you earlier on, a British commissioner, Lord Hill, and we were negotiating a deal with David Cameron. Who remembers that? Pages and pages and pages, days and nights. And he was always telling me, I need this and that because I have Mrs. May, who is not very happy with everything which is said about a deal with Britain. Nobody mentioned this deal during the referendum campaign, nobody. How is that possible that you are concluding a deal with a government and nobody is mentioning the content and the atmosphere of that deal during a campaign? That's the British way of not saying things. But they were saying things, some of them, lying. Telling the people things which have nothing to do with our day-by-day reality. David Cameron asked me not to intervene in the referendum campaign because he said, well, the European Commission is even less popular on the islands than on the continent, which in fact is a performance, but don't intervene in the debate. That was a major mistake, a major error. I should have intervened because nobody was denying, contesting the lies Boris Johnson and others were spreading around. So it's a question of European democratic debate. We were not part of the debate. We were submitted to the debate, un objet du débat et pas un sujet du débat. That was a mistake. And I said to Lord Hill, Jonathan, you will lose. If you will win, I will give you €1. If you will lose, you give me £1. I have the pound in my pocket. I was not surprised by the outcome of the referendum.
Yes, please, sir.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Hui Zhu with China Youth Daily. Mr. President, would you just evaluate the EU-China relations in your mandate the last 5 years, and what is your expectations in the next 5 years? Thank you.
I had, since I was appointed Prime Minister, the best relations possible with China. Whenever I'm in China, the President and the Prime Minister is saying, all the Chinese know that you are a friend of China. I'm doubting if all the Chinese do know it. You know, I have a good relation with China, which allows me to joke with China. And I always said to the colleagues over there, do you know why Luxembourg did never attack the Popular Republic of China? They didn't know. So we don't have space enough to put the prisoners in. So, apart jokes, I had good relations with my Chinese friends because I consider them as friends. I had, during this mandate, 10 meetings or so with the President and the Prime Minister. alone or together with others. And I told them, you are our competitors. You are our rivals or rivals. What is English? Rivals or rivals? Rivals. And at the first moment they were struck. I said, that's a compliment. Because we are in competition. We have several problems with China, although having large intersections of interests. The Chinese overproduction in steel is exactly the double of the total steel production of the European Union. This cannot go on, because this Chinese performance, is easily explained by the fact that the Chinese government, the Chinese authorities are supporting their steel industry with other means than we are allowed to do it in Europe. But independently from that, I do think that it's in the interest both of China and of the European Union to have the best relations possible with China. I like them. And I would like them to like us as much as I like them.
Maybe take one more question?
Yeah,
So good? Please. Just try it.
Thank you, David Price, Your Democracy and Schumann.info. I come from what might be called the island of lepers, because if you go back to 2004, there's only been, as far as I calculate, one visit from Mr. Barroso, and I think yourself only made one visit.
To where?
To United Kingdom, the island off the continent.
Normally, I'm responding to invitations.
Okay, but since the time of Mr. Barroso, there's been grave doubts about at first the Constitutional Treaty and then the Lisbon Treaty, from the point of view of transparency and democracy. But if you don't engage with people on those particular points, not just the economics, you obviously get into a problem. And I'm wondering if you'd like to assess those last 2 decades, which go far beyond your mandate.
I don't believe that you are right if you are given the impression that the European Commission or the European Union as such is not in contact with real life. We are talking to citizens. I should invite you outside Britain. If I'm walking through the streets, people are stopping me and they are telling me what they do think they have to tell me. That was mainly the case in Luxembourg. You know, Luxembourg has a Portuguese population of 20% of the inhabitants, and the Portuguese friends, they are all my friends because I like Portugal very much, like Greece. They were stopping me in the street and they were saying, Signor Primo Ministro, everything is okay in Luxembourg, but there are too many foreigners. That's what a successful integration really means. And I don't think that Barroso and his predecessors, including myself as having been his successor, that we are not in touch with reality. I told you earlier on this evening that we have 1,800 citizen dialogues. You know, this is demanding because you have the meeting and then you have hundreds of people coming to see you and telling you that what is wrong and what is right, mainly what is wrong. So I never had the impression that I was flying through the last 5 years when it comes to the need we have to listen more to citizens. But there is another dimension in this. Citizens have also to listen to us. It's easy to criticize the Commission and the European Union and so on, but if we are taking the floor, who is listening? We are not more stupid than those who are criticizing us. We are all stupid together and all intelligent together. And so-called ordinary people, I don't like that expression, but my English is too poor to articulate this in the right way, the elites are not more intelligent than ordinary people. My father was a steel worker. He was not less intelligent than the bosses of the steel industry. By the contrary.
Thank you. Mr. President, let's see who it is.
For once, it's not my wife.
Ah, that's bad. I would...
It looks British.
I would like to exploit the fact that I have the honor of moderating and pose one question to you.
That's why moderators are always volunteer to moderate.
Exactly, to not ask a question. One question. If I would ask you for one piece of advice, not advice for your successor or for your successors, but one piece of advice on the basis of your experience, not only of the past 5 years, but much more. Advice to all of us Europeans in terms of what we should have in mind when we look towards the future. What is there one thing, or can one express one piece of advice to all of us?
I was saying the other day in Parliament, take care of Europe. Peace is not evident. It's under danger every day. There are 60 wars worldwide, not one war on the territory of the European Union. Take care of Europe and fight against this stupid nationalism which is reappearing. Be patriots, yes, but don't be nationalists. Don't be patriots against the others. Be patriots for yourself and for the others. And let's try to keep Europe as an open place for those who are deeply unhappy. It's part of the European message to stay as an open continent.
Thank you very much for this piece of advice. What is my humble task now?
And don't follow the populists.
Yes.
Because by the end of the day, you will land as a populist yourself.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And it is something which is very much with us, even if some believe that the worst might be behind us. This is not true. I want to end by saying 3 big thanks. The first big thank is the fact that you were with us today, that you delivered a speech just a couple of days before the end of your Commission's mandate, and that this was effectively also your last speech in Brussels within your mandate. And I want to thank you for the fact that you did this at the EPC, which obviously honors us, and for your frank, your honest words, but also your forward-looking words. And I think that for all of us who listened carefully to what you were saying, and you were referring to things which have happened over the past years, but there were a lot of conclusions one can draw for the future. The second big thank is for the past 5 years and beyond. For me and for many others in this room, it seems as if you have been here forever. In your speech, by the way, you made a joke and you spoke about the centuries of you being with us. So you seem to have also the same feeling. And we always witnessed you as a very passionate European in the different positions you've had at the European, but also at the national level. And I think you always had a very clear compass of the direction in which we should be going. And I think in times of uncertainty and volatility, this is a key feature which one should have. And the last is a bit of a personal thank you. And I usually don't do these things, but today I will do. Because over the past 10 years, but also especially over the past 5 years, we witnessed tough years. History was full of multiple interrelated crises. You were talking about the economic crisis, the social crisis. And we were tested again and again. And as you know, I am half German, half Greek.
Yeah. That's a mixture. Huh? That's a mixture.
It is an interesting mixture. And I think over the past years it has shown, it has sometimes been also a bit of a challenge of being that mixture. Yeah. And you were referring to 2015. when you and your commission had only been shortly in office and we witnessed the last culmination point of the so-called Greek crisis. And I think we actually, and you were referring to that, we found ourselves at an edge where we didn't know in which direction things would be moving. And at that point in time, you played an enormous role. Even though, as you were referring today, and you also mentioned in the Parliament the other day, a good number of others and also EU leaders didn't want you to play that role, but you play that role. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for that as a German and Greek, because at the time you spoke, and you were one of the few who spoke directly to them, to the Greeks and to the Germans. And in the Greek case, you made a severe difference of moving them away from the abyss. And we all know what the consequences would have been if they would have fallen. And it would not have only been economic, it would not have been only social and political, but it also would have been societal. And I want to thank you as a European, because you knew what was at stake at the time. You knew that a temporarily exit of Greece from the Eurozone first might not have been temporary, and what it would meant for the common currency, but also beyond. And not everyone at the time was aware of these potential consequences and what this historic mistake would have meant. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I hope that when we will find ourselves in future storms, that we will have people leading us who have that right conviction and the right leadership compass.
Yeah,
So
to jump on your last remark, when I was leaving the office of the Luxembourg Prime Minister, awarded with the highest decoration of Germany. Großes Bundesverdienst mit Schulterband und Stern.
That's big.
I would, by the way, I would have preferred to speak German or French tonight, but although nobody understands England, everyone understands English, and so there is this new rule, lingua franca is English, and it will not change after the Brexit. But when Angela Merkel was handing me over this declaration, she was saying, according to recent opinion polls, you are the most popular European Prime Minister in Germany.
Yes.
So, okay. Head of government, did you say, because she wanted to be included in the comparative list. And then I said, but I'm also the most popular Prime Minister in Greece. And who can say that he is as popular in Germany as in Greece?
No, that was something very particular, and I can witness that.
Thank you for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us, and thank you from all of us.